Hey there everyone, how's it going? Look at this little toy we have here. PlayStation 3, right? Yes, this is something I was already waiting for, which is very important. I wanted to share it with you, because it's a chance to make some money, where usually people don't know, okay? This here is a PlayStation 3, and when we turn it on, it shows the famous iLoad, right? It gives a little blink here in green, blinks yellow, and then turns off. I'm going to test it here so you can take a look. Let me pull the power cable out. Here we go. Let's see if we can see it clearly. Let's take a closer look here. The little red light is on. I turned it on. It went green, then yellow, then back to red, and started flashing red. This is the famous iLoad. Many people expect a strong yellow light. It doesn't show a strong light because it lights up on the same LED. So it goes to the green light, then flashes yellow and returns to red. It flashes yellow very briefly and then goes back to flashing red. This is the famous iLoad. When this type of defect occurs, people usually condemn the device right away. You have to do reballing, or you have to replace the processor and everything else. There's nothing else to be done. And it's in this type of game that we win. Why? This game here, its code is CSH. Let me see if you can see it. CSH 2001A, right? This is H2001A, correct. So, if it has this CH code from the 2000 series, from the 2001 series, and below, we already know that it works with NEC tokens, right? In the power supply line of the processors. What are NEC tokens? NEC tokens are components that serve the same function as a capacitor, right? Like a tantalum capacitor, for example. And what happens? The NEC token, with heat and over time, ends up losing capacitance. So, your PlayStation 3 no longer has enough power, so to speak, to supply the processors when it is turned on. And that ends up causing this defect. Of course, I'm telling you this. This is one of the hypotheses. I'm saying this because it's what usually happens with this device. I haven't analyzed it yet. I just removed the screws here to make it easier for us to open. The first thing we will do is check for any type of short on the board, because if I have a short in the main power line, it can also cause this symptom. But in this model from the CSH 2001A series and earlier, that is from 2001 to the older ones, they work with NEC tokens. So be aware of this, because there is a chance for you to make some money. Usually people don't fix it because they think there's nothing to be done, right? They assume it's a BGA issue or a processor problem, and then they pass the game along, right? We take it and find this defect. In other words, a PlayStation 3 with iLoad is not always a processor or BGA problem, right? These little models here are ones I love to buy. This one is a customer's, but this is the type of model I buy for 50 bucks. This type of device, it shows up for me for 50 bucks. Usually I redo the power line for the processors there and it's ready to sell. All right, what are we going to do? That's it, okay? Loneliness, logically, we would replace the NEC tokens. But that's not interesting. First, because the NEC token is a pain to remove. It is horrible. It is difficult to take out the NEC token. And secondly, because it is a component that wears out over time. Instead, we will add tantalum capacitors to this line of NEC tokens. Over time, Sony itself corrected these devices. The early ones only worked with NEC tokens, both in the power line of the cell, which is the processor, and in the power line of the RSX, which is the graphics processor. Over time, it began to be replaced. First, they started to use tantalum capacitors in the cell line, while the RSX line continued with NEC tokens, which is probably what happens with this device and the Series 3000 and above. From the CSH code I showed you earlier, in the Series 3000 and above, they no longer use NEC tokens. They only use tantalum capacitors. In other words, Sony itself was correcting this problem over time, right? What are we going to do? Are we going to remove the NEC token? No, there's no need, because it's not defective. It has low capacitance. and no longer has the storage capacity it would need for, right? Don't mind me. We would need the power supply for the processors, so we will add this capacitance with these tantalum capacitors. Usually that resolves the issue. But first, let's open it up here and see if we have any kind of short circuit to perform a standard procedure. Hey, there. Goodbye, and take care. Oh, this here that I told you about. You can see that in this model, Sony has already placed tantalum capacitors, right? In the older models, we also had neck token here. These here are the neck tokens, right? We can even read them there. See, neck token. These are the neck tokens. These neck tokens are in the power line of the graphics processor, the RSX, right? Here, you can see that in the sky, Sony has already corrected it and added tantalum capacitors, right? What would our work be here? What are we probably going to do? We are going to add tantalum capacitors here. We are not going to remove the neck tokens. We will keep them here and simply add tantalum capacitors, right? 2 or 3 tantalum capacitors here to address this power deficiency, right? But first, let's measure the CN-HDMI part here. We have the CN-HDMI, you can see it by the port. The HDMI port is here, and the CN-HDMI is here. So, let's measure to see if we have any kind of short circuit here. Probably not, but just to be sure, we need to measure. Let's check the ground with the black probe, the continuity ladder. We'll check the capacitors down here. There is no short. High resistance. I'll get another one here. Here's the GND on the other side of the capacitor. High resistance. I'll get one more here in the corner. High resistance. So you can see that I do not have a short in the HDMI IC, CN-HDMI. Now here, we are going to measure on the network IC. We have the network cable port here, and here we have the network IC, right? So, the same thing, the ground is the black tip, and here there's no secret, folks. It's just to place the probe on one side and on the other side of the capacitors. Place it on one side, it gave GND. Like here, for example, you place it on the other side of the capacitor. Did it show high resistance? High resistance, around 400 and something. So that doesn't indicate a short to me. To indicate a short, it would have to be a very low resistance. Let's take another one here. High resistance as well. So everything indicates that there is no type of short on the board. For our work, it wouldn't even be necessary to remove the board from the heatsink. However, since our service is meant to be well done, we will remove the board because later we will replace the thermal paste. So let's take it out because we are going to clean it, right? What am I going to do? I'm going to take it out of here, just so we can take another look at it from the top. Now we will place the tantalum capacitors here, put it back in place, and test it just to see if it won't turn off anymore. If he keeps the little green light on, the job is done. Let's remove it here. Here you need to be a little careful when removing it from the heat sink, because usually the thermal paste sticks there. If you pull too hard, you might bend the board too much, and that can be a bit dangerous. So take your time, go slowly, and peel off this glove little by little. It gets caught on everything. It's a horrible thing. Once it comes off, it leaves a sticky residue. This thermal paste is also quite dirty, so I'll set it aside here. I'm going to use a brush here, just a little bit more to carefully and gently remove this dirt. I don't use an anti-static brush. I actually have an anti-static brush, but for these cleanings that I have, I prefer a large brush that I like, which is a regular brush. A regular brush doesn't cause any problems. You can use it. This here is the It's a really interesting repair to do that allows you to make a decent amount of money while spending very little. You can buy the tantalum capacitor on the free market or salvage it from scrap. For example, I always take it from scrap boards, so I practically have no cost. Therefore, for a repair like this, I charge the client 220 Rs, and the capacitor comes from a board that cost me nothing. So the cost is basically my analysis on the game, the time I spent on the game, the cleaning, the replacement of thermal paste, and so on. But the component itself, even if I were to buy it, is cheap. For example, on this board here, 2 to 3 tantalum capacitors are enough. There's no need to fill it up. It's a low-cost service that offers a great return on investment, which is why I mentioned in the course advertisement that the gaming industry is a good area due to its profitability. Generally, we have low costs and a significant return. So, but Mike, is all of this just to do that? Are you going to spend a capacitor? Yes, but that's how it is. Most people condemn this game. This game would end up in the trash. We bring them a solution. It's only fair that we have an interesting price for our knowledge, right? Most people don't do it. We have this knowledge because we seek it out. So, most of the value we charge is not for the component. It is, indeed, for our work. And our work includes our pursuit of knowledge, right? All the experiences we've been through and everything else, and the labor, right? So let's go. Okay? So we don't have a short circuit, right? The short would have to be in the main power supply line, especially since the game turns on and then turns off immediately. So if there were a short, it would be in the main power supply line. It could be in the HDMI IC or in the network IC, but that's not the case. So we have two possibilities. Either we have a problem with the BGA of the graphics processor, or we have an insufficiency in the power supply line. Since this device works with NEC tokens, the likelihood of the issue being in the power supply line is very high. So this is where we are going to work. Let's add the tantalum capacitors here. Okay? Let's go. I will find a support that fits better, because here it has the pins of the board. If I leave the board here, it will be unstable. So I will put something on top here. This brings us a little closer to being able to look at it, and makes it easier to do the work. I'm going to use my professional support here, my PlayStation 2, the most beautiful thing I have. This scrap is totally wrecked. This PlayStation 2 isn't even worth it, so it will be my support. Now what we need to do here is simple. Let's go. This tantalum capacitor has polarity, right? So you have to take care of that. I don't know if I'll be able to capture it on camera here. I'll try. This will be tricky. This will be tricky. Let's go on one side of the tantalum capacitor. I don't know if I'll be able to capture it on camera, but on one side of the tantalum capacitor, there is a little white stripe and a little gray stripe, right? The side with this little stripe is the positive side of the capacitor, right? So the side with the white stripe is the positive side, and that's what we need to take care of. Because here in the NEC tokens, right, we have the positive side here on both ends. Here is the positive, and here is also the positive. On both ends, it is positive. In the center here is the GND, right? So we have positive here, we have positive here, so there are no secrets here. I just need to place the tantalum capacitor with the positive side of the tantalum capacitor on the positive side here of the board's line, right? There are some models that are better to install. I usually place the tantalum capacitors here. Generally, I put one here, and the other turned downwards, one to C. I usually do it this way. It looks nicer, right? It's just that these NEC tokens are too far to the right, so I hardly have any space left to solder here on the positive side. Here you can see from the board's layout that this is where the power supply ends, and here is where the GND begins. So, I will have to solder over there. Let me see if this will work out. It's going to look good, so we'll have to solder it in a different way. A way that doesn't look as nice, but that works. We'll put one here like this, right? More or less here. We can place another one here, for example. We can put about 2 here. Okay, let's place 3 tantalum capacitors. Let's arrange them more or less like this. Alright, it will look something like this. It's not the kind of work I enjoy doing. Usually I prefer to do it the way I showed at the beginning. But what we need is to make them work. So basically, that's what we're going to do. We're going to scrape the board, tin the board, and solder the tantalum capacitors here as they are, respecting their polarity. And that's it. Let's do that and test the thing. Let's scrape. Here we scrape the board to reach the copper of the board, right? We need to tin here to solder the little guys. Oh, but can I swap the neck tops? Sure. You can simply replace the neck tokens. You can find the neck tokens for purchase. But it's that thing, right? They get damaged more easily, of course. So when you install them, it won't be after a month or 3 months that they'll have problems. It will take a few years. But it is much easier to damage. Not to mention that it is annoying, extremely annoying. Removing these neck tokens here usually results in them coming out in pieces, just to give you an idea. The PlayStation 3 board dissipates a lot of heat, so it is very difficult to reach a melting point temperature at a point on the board. It's difficult because it dissipates a lot, so you'll be there cooking the component, and it will start to break apart because here it's a kind of plastic, so it will start to break apart and you'll have to scrape. It can be done. It can be done and make a nice job. It can, but it's not interesting. Alright, so over there I'm going, the positive, right? I scraped it. Now I'm going to scrape here where I'm going to get the GND from the board, because this side here is already GND, so I'm going to get the GND from here. There's no other way here, folks. It's a scraping. For us to get... I will move other one over here. I haven't even turned on my soldering station yet. I just remembered just now. Otherwise I would have to wait for it to heat up. Here. You need to scrape it really well until it becomes very nice and shiny, okay? So, it's actually going to be one here. 2 here, by the way. Let me see. Let's put one more here, you know. I have repaired this device with this symptom a lot, really a lot. And in the vast majority of cases, the problem is precisely this: insufficient power supply. These gloves here are horrible to work with. I don't like working with gloves. Let's apply some flux to make our soldering easier. Let's go. Tinning the little points. I'm also going to carefully and precisely tin the tantalum capacitors. It has both terminals here, and I'm going to tin both terminals there as well. Did you heat up my station here as well? And precisely. Well, I'm going to tin here the capacitors. Capacitors are essential components in electronic circuits. They store and release electrical energy, which is crucial for the functioning of various devices. It's horrible to work with this glove, guys. However, working with them can be challenging, especially when wearing gloves. There's no grip to hold the components, you know? The gloves make it difficult to grip and handle the small components effectively. If I'm having trouble here with the terminals of the capacitor, let's put it in place, right? I need to be careful with the polarity, okay? It's crucial to always remember the importance of checking the polarity. When working with electrical circuits. If you overlook this detail, you might inadvertently create a short circuit, which can lead to significant problems and potential damage to the components involved. This is definitely something you want to avoid. Now, let's explore the most effective method for me to gain access to this particular area. Up to this point, I've noticed that one side of the component is already soldered, which presents a unique challenge. We need to carefully consider our approach to ensure we can proceed without causing any issues. The other one, always, checking the polarity to avoid reversing it. Whoa, wow, I'm telling you, this glove here is terrible. Here, there is absolutely no need to keep it absolutely perfectly straight. Okay, folks? Because the way I'm placing it here, there's definitely not much I can do to control that. It's certainly better to do it the first way I mentioned to you, but since it's all over the place, it didn't close the gap I needed there. It didn't turn out exactly how I wanted, but considering that I'm looking through the camera and doing it this way, it actually doesn't look too bad. If I don't like it later, I'll probably end up adjusting it, but I just want to show you how it's going to work and everything else. But I'll take a look at that part later. Look, it sticks to the glove, see? As you can see, it's quite an interesting process. When working with electrical systems, it's crucial to always respect the concept of polarity. This means you should never forget about the positive and negative terminals, as they play a vital role in the proper functioning of the system. Imagine you're navigating a complex circuit. You need to turn this way and that way, just like following a map. If you ignore the polarity, you might end up with a malfunction or even damage the components. So, always double check the connections. For instance, when you turn this way, ensure the positive is aligned correctly, and when you turn that way, verify the negative is in place. Alright, keeping these points in mind will help you maintain a safe and efficient operation. Let me check here just to be sure. I will carefully remove a bit more of the excess flux here. There it is. My solder is crooked, but I'll fix that later, without the camera here. Then I can adjust it properly to at least make them straight, right? Because otherwise, later the client will open this up to do a cleaning, and look at this, they'll say, "My God, what a horrible thing." But what matters is that they are installed. I'm not going to replace the thermal paste right now. I'm just going to put it here so we can test it. And then after finishing the video, I'll come back here and fix these that are a bit crooked. I'll replace the thermal paste and make it all nice. Okay. I'm going to carefully put the shielding back on it. Here we need to screw back at least the clamps that hold the processor to the board. We have to put those in, otherwise it will definitely overheat. Let's see if our little device works. Here, right. Usually that's the problem. Simply connect the cooler here. Connect the power board here. The power cable and the power supply, right? I need to give this power supply a little brush because it's looking bad. Later, I will leave the image for you. I already have some photos of my capacitors from so many installed, and I will put them in a booklet for us to see, or maybe I'll just share them in the WhatsApp group. Connect here. I won't put in the HD. I won't put in the rest because I just want to know if it will stay on, if it keeps the green light on without giving the eye load. I know everything is fine, and then I finish up. I do the soldering nicely for the many lights that have already bothered me. I replace the thermal paste, clean it up, assemble the device, and then I test it for you, okay? Oh right, where does it need to be plugged in? We have the little red light. Can you see it from there? It's hard to see, right? The little green light. Let me see if I can raise it up here for you. There it is, guys. Where's the eye load? The little green light stayed on. You see, eye load is a device that everyone criticizes. Here it is. Let's turn it off and see if we can turn it off here and turn it back on to check. Turn it off. Turn it off, bro. There's the red light. Let's turn it on. Quickly. When we turned it on, it would go to the green light and blink yellow, a symptom of eye load. Let's turn it on. There's the green light. Cooler working. There it is. Done. This is our problem now. We just need to clean this game, fix the capacitors nicely, put some thermal paste on properly, keep it clean, and assemble it. Later, I'll make a video for you to show it working. It's just that if we don't do it here, we take too long. Our idea is that it solved the little guy correctly.